Hey, thanks for downloading, listening to, and watching the Lean Into Artcast, a show where a couple of visual storytellers get together and take on various topics that tend to occur, to bubble up, to present themselves, to rear their heads when one goes off on this adventure of communicating with images. We think hard about this stuff, so you will too. My name is Jerzy Drozd. I am a cartoonist and a teaching artist, and the other host is...
And a wild topic appears. Hey, I'm Rob Stenzinger, a UX designer, and I also make video games.
Good to see you again, Rob. Is it looking like afternoons on Thursdays is going to be the new recording time?
I think let's see if this works. Let's keep
this is our third Thursday at noon in a row, noon Eastern, 11 Central. And I don't know. I guess we'll give it a few more weeks and see if this pattern continues. And if it does, then we'll establish a new official time.
Yeah.
For the folks who want to chime in on the live streams. And as we approach different live stream technologies, that's the other one that's got to change in the weeks to come. We'll still have a presence on YouTube, but like the way we stream to YouTube is changing. So we might have to look into some other technologies with regard to that. So I guess that's a reason to not get too uptight or prescriptive about like establishing a new official time, because we still don't even know how we're going to be doing it in the next month or so, right?
Yeah. I mean, so we're sharing the news that it's ongoing. We're figuring it out, and maybe the time is stabilizing, but then the other dimension of tools and other stuff is going to be in flux. That's just how it goes when you use these big platforms. Things happen. Let's see. So you have oh gosh, it's funny. There's a sort of piece of software that sometimes I set aside in my head. And because I don't think of this, what are these the kind of when you set a goal and you're going to have a measure for your project, and so you have key performance indicators, and then you have our KPIs, as a lot of people call them, or you have your OKRs, outcomes, and key results, right? And so some combination of those you could use them interchangeably. Some people call them, like give them each a different job. Like OKR is for what we're doing new and different. And so for meeting our OKRs, that means we're evolving. Our KPIs means we're keeping the lights on or whatever. So anyway, I mean, projects have all this judgment happening to them, and they sometimes don't make it. I wonder what the story is with the Google Hangouts and the streaming integration with YouTube, because it's been great for us, but I don't know. We're not crossing not making the number change enough or whatever to keep that tool alive. But oh well, it's been nice.
Yeah, it has been nice, but now it'll be time to test some other different solutions, whether we do something with Twitch or using some combination of like Jitsi Meet or some of these other different streaming technologies.
Yeah. It's tough. So many trade-offs with this too. I mean, if anyone has thoughts or happy things and or favorites, or like, or waving us off, right? Like Lean Into Art's pretty mellow. I don't know what I could do with the chat, and then like, I don't know, a barking dog that would pop up once or whatever. Like, what does chaos like Lean Into Art look like?
Yeah. I was watching some Twitch streams just to get a sense of like how the software works. I noticed that there's like the professional gamers who do it. They have like these leaderboards of like the current donation list. They'll have like this crawl going on in the bottom of the screen at all times. And yeah, it does seem it made me think back to my days working at a casino. It really gave me like a little bit of a cold shiver that way. Like, there's a lot of visual information happening on this screen right now. And maybe that would make us more of a purple cow in that situation. I don't know. But yeah, we've got some experimenting to do in the weeks to come. And that'll probably make for some really good topics for the show too, as we experiment and, reflect on what we encounter with trying out different platforms. So, but this show, we do it every week where we pick a topic and try to drill all the way down. And this week we're going to do as the title suggested, a walkthrough of some Clip Studio Paint basics. It's been a while since we've done like sort of a broad overview of Clip Studio Paint, which is a drawing application that I've been using for every project I do for what now? I want to say 7 years. I think 2012 was the first time I employed it, when it was Manga Studio 4. It's been a big part of my life for a long time now, and I really like the software. I think it's incredibly useful for making comics. And we got a comment on our latest Extra Lean episode, which was, you don't remember the title of that by any chance? I can pull it up.
We Believe in You.
We Believe in You. That's right, because it was the one with excerpts from my appearance at Nerd Camp, mine and my wife's appearance at the Nerd Camp draw off, where 1,500 children screamed and screamed. We played some audio from it in that episode. You can get to it at patreon.com/leanintoart. But one of our leaners commented on that episode and said that they were working, I think it was Good to Be Curious, was saying that they were working in Clip Studio Paint, just trying to get like their bearings on it. And so I thought, you know what, this would be a good opportunity to do an hour where we just go through what my workflow is. There's a lot of videos you can go to on YouTube on how to set up Clip Studio Paint, but just a brief overview of how to even get started drawing in it. I thought we could do that today. What do you think, Rob?
I'd love that. I'm a occasional, I would say semi-frequent user of Clip Studio Paint, and it's a great tool. I use it on the iPad, but I have not sort of had that like you have so much emphasis and focus on. That's one of the main things you do is make comics, right? So it's for me it's a great general purpose drawing app. But so I'm excited to hear from your perspective, which is so informed by this frequent practice, and it has been a while. So it's been a little while, and I spend at least a couple hours a day in this application. Wow.
Which I mean, when I think about it that way, it's like that actually could justify the $10 a month if I wanted to get the iPad version. If I wanted to get an iPad, right? Like, but I bristle at the thought of having to pay $10 a month for it. By the way, I should say Clip Studio Paint if you haven't purchased it yet, it's very inexpensive software comparatively speaking, compared to like Adobe Creative Cloud. It's I think at full price $45 outright, and I think you can put it on up to 2 different machines. It's often on sale. It goes on sale all the time. And so if you are on the fence about it, just wait a couple weeks and it'll go down to like $25 or $15. That's how much I paid for it. And it works on Mac, works on PC. It works great on the Windows 10 screen devices like the Surface Pro and so on. And it works terrific on the iPad. Only downside of working on the iPad is that it is $10 a month. It's a subscription fee to have it. So, but if you use it every day like I do, then I guess that would be a justified cost, and that would also be a business expense that I could claim. So
you're getting close to that, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. I mean, once I handled an iPad Pro, I was like, oh my gosh, this thing is light and this thing is snappy, and that pencil's really nice. And I don't have tilt supports on my Vio canvas. So, there's things that it does that I'm just like, oh, that's very compelling. But then, like, I always stop myself saying, like, oh, but $10 a month. Like, I think I could probably swing it if I really. I mean, like I said, it feels very justified given how much I use it. So, all that prefacing, how about we hit the music? And I'm gonna have to turn on screen sharing for this. But that felt like it was like possibly overpromising.
You're about to go to wage some artful battle, I guess. Trying to not use that metaphor, but yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to count on you, Rob, to keep an eye on the clock and on the chat, because all I can see right now is what's in front of me with Clip Studio Paint. So here is the interface of Clip Studio Paint, and I thought we could start out with like setting up a template and just beginning work on the page for the first half, and then in the second half we can talk about some different drawing and some other like comics page execution. And here is a page of finished art from Amazon Academy. One of the first things, like probably like the biggest number one tip I could tell anybody who's going to be using the software is that it's marvelous in that the interface gets the heck out of your way. As you can see, all of the menus are shunted to the right and the left and the top. But what that means is that all of your tools are nested in all these little subcategories. So if I go to a brush tool in the left-hand side of the screen, by the way, apologies to people who are listening in the audio. We'll do our best to describe what I'm doing. But this is definitely going to be one where you benefit from watching the video. In the second bar on the left, you can see that there are 3 different brush icons, plus there's like some color wheel icons. And there's even like this weird cue with like an arrow in it. Now, these are all sub menus that I can open up just by tapping on it. And when I tap on the brush icon, we could see that I've got like 1, 2, 3, there's 9 different like collections of brushes I've got in here, right? And then underneath that are like the characteristics of each brush. So I can change its size, I can change its opacity, I could change the amount of anti-aliasing, and you can even change what they call stabilization, which is where you tell the CPU to interpret what you're doing to like smooth your line.
Question,
right?
Jerzy.
Yes.
So this looks really well. Your setup looks more organized than my setup. Like I know I picked up some brushes from Friendin and stuff, and I just sort of threw them in, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I kind of have a mess. Like, how did you? What was a little bit of your thinking for setting up your tools, and like how long did it take you to get this organized?
Yeah. So, well, as we've said, I spend a couple hours a day with this at least, you know, and a lot of times upwards of 5 to 7 hours a day with this. So I have spent a lot of time organizing this application. And like the command bar at the top is actually pretty thoughtfully organized as well. So that when I hit the tab key and all of my interface goes away, you can see in the top right, I've got icons to select my brush, my watercolor brush, my eraser, my magic wand tool and selection tool, and even the operation tool, which you use a lot in this application. So like you could even like make the entire interface vanish if you want to, and just have that command bar there. So this is all very customizable, which I mean, making a new brush collection is super easy. Like let's just go to say like my pencils. So here's all my pencil collection. And if I want to start a new pencil collection, I'll just grab the tool and I'll drag it up to the top where these little category tabs are and see where that red line forms. And that'll automatically create another collection of just that brush. Right? There's just that brush. And
so
then
the first thing you drag it to cause a new category sort of defines the category.
Yep.
Okay.
And then you can just drag your brushes into that collection. So it's and you can change the name of the collection. So I could say like, you know, soft pencils, and now that is just called soft pencils and whatever pencils I put in there. But I'll put that back where that was, and then that collection goes away, right? So it takes a little bit of, you know, work to get this as organized as it is. And mine isn't even that organized, but it's, you know, I will admit that I've spent some time on it. So I have like a general inking brush collection. I have a painterly / watercolor brush collection, and then I have a collection of pencils. And then there's even as you go down and play around with the different tool settings, there's pattern brushes, effects brushes. You know, you can do like a bunch of like basically like cloning stamp kind of brushes. Like this is a foliage brush I made where you can easily make, you know, trees and bushes just by scrubbing around, and you can change the amount of the density of the foliage. So you can do like some, and we'll go into making custom brushes a little bit later on. But anyway,
yeah, that's a great effect. So like there's this volume. It reminds me, it's like wow, and then you throw in with a different brush a few branches, and yeah, that is that's really convincing tree. It reminds me of the classic spray paint.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, or what's so funny is like this, it's such a practical thing though, where the classic spray paint in painting apps was almost practical for me, right? And then the wild cloning tools, like I remember when Painter had cloning put into it, or the image hose, I think they called it. And
yeah,
you could just start throwing things, but it was all like fully rendered butterflies and stuff, right? Where I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
is this practical? This was fun. But
It's
that
and
tree
it's
is awesome.
yeah, it's trivial to make these in Clip Studio Paint. And actually there are things like fully rendered things, like here's a trees brush, right? Where it makes trees just like you're
Whoa,
describing.
that's the
Yeah.
image hose.
Yeah, it's totally that. But like I made my own where I made a little random sampling of leaves, and then I can change their density and the amount of randomness so it's actually, this is a tree that is made of my drawings, right? And I have like a star field that I made as well. Like, so when I'm doing space scenes, I can easily just like populate the sky with stars. But anyway, that was just to describe, to show everybody that like over on the right side, you have a bunch of different menus that you can customize. And this is where I keep my layers. This is where you can have your, like reference images pulled up. And you can easily load new ones, and then your navigator, so you can move around the canvas and also flip the canvas which I use a lot when I'm doing my drawing to make sure that you're doing your mirror test. But most of the time I hang out in the layers palette. Now, how about we walk through setting up a brand new page, how I do it at least. Like what I have here here's a page of Amazon Academy, and this is the page template that I open every time I get started on a new page. But how do you even get to this point? So let's make a new document with Control-N, Command-N, or at the top of your screen, there's this little page icon with a little star next to it. That creates a new page, or you have your sub-menus right here, File, New. There's always a trillion ways to do everything. And then depending on what kind of document you're making. So it has use of work up here at the top. And this is like, are you just doing an illustration? It's going to give you some options. Are you doing actually a comic page? Are you doing, do you want to use all settings, or even are you making animation? Which don't ask me questions about animating, because I don't use this software for that. That's a completely different discussion. But if I say show all comic settings, then we get our options for, width and height. And over here in the top right, or just underneath the cancel button, is we can change what units we want to measure by. I set mine to inches because I live in the United States, and that's like how most publishing is measured, is in inches. But you could also set it to work in centimeters, millimeters, pixels, and in points. So I could set my height and width. And then down here in the bottom left, there is the option for Manga draft settings. This is how you set your margins. So even though my document is going to be 7.17 inches wide by 10.12 inches tall, that's just an arbitrary number I just picked just for the purposes of this demonstration. You set your resolution, basic expression color. This is like when you make a layer, what is it going to do? We'll talk about layer modes in a little bit, but I always have mine set to color. But once you tap Manga draft settings, then you can set what your actual margins are. What's your bleed area? What is going to be your final trim size? And you can download a template from Kablam to get their template sizes. If you're working on a project for a publisher, they often will give you this information up front. You can also just measure the size of the book that you want it to be, and then just add an extra 1/4 inch to the outside just to make sure that you have like some plenty of bleed area. But I usually, here's my template that I set up, and you can see after I set my margins, there's crop marks there indicating, I'll try to draw on the screen. There's crop marks here indicating where the final trim size is going to be, which means that this is going to be the final trim size, which means that this is bleed area, and this is external, and this is like going to be cut area. So like no important art should go in this area. Kind of important art, but certainly no word balloons go in that area. And anything that you want to actually exist on the page should be in this area. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's sort of 3 zones, because from a practical standpoint, as precise as the whole printing process is, there's still just, I don't know, physics and stuff moves or whatever, and books get cut. One batch of books can have a slightly different cut than another, and you want to make sure that it's not, there's some forgiveness, right? In your, that's what you're planning for.
So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete all these layers. And so this is what I would arrive at after establishing those margins. So now what I'm going to do is down in the bottom, and remember, this is key to working with this software, is if you don't know where it is, you're going to have to dig through some nested menus. So I'm going to look for making a panel border, because I'm going to start with that. And that is usually nested in the same area as it's like the one of the bottom 3 tools. And when I click on that little ruler icon, the little triangle, I'll look inside into the sub menu menu to the second from the left. And sure enough, right there at the top middle, at least in my instance of this application, is the frame tools. They call them frames in this. I call them panels, but they're whatever. The boxes in which all the art exists. And there's a rectangle frame. There's circle frame. There's frame border pen, so you can draw your own panel borders. And the neat thing about panel borders in this, the real pain point that Clip Studio Paint solved, is that when I draw a panel with the frame tool, it automatically creates a folder where the live area, anything that exists outside of the panel is automatically masked out. So if I create a layer inside of this folder, let me drag it in there just to make sure it's in there, and I start drawing inside of it, and I draw outside of it, it automatically masks out any art that goes outside of the panel border. And I can prove this by bringing the layer up above the panel folder, and you can see that I drew all over the place. But if I drag it back into that panel folder, that automatically gets hidden. So this makes it so that you don't have to like slow down as you approach the panel border art, which is nice. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go ahead and trash that again because I want to actually draw. What I'm going to do now is, and you can set in your tool property menu underneath the subtool menu, you can see that you can change the kind of brush line. You can actually say like, oh, I want to have like a spray panel border. So now it's going to have more of a jagged line. I don't know if how well you can see that. Or, or you can say, well, I want this one to have, a weird pattern border. Right. So you can change the actual panel line. You can change the thickness of the line. You make it thicker and thicker, thinner.
Is there a particular brush associated with the border of a panel? So then you could have your own custom panel border?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. So like actually at the bottom of a lot of the menus, there is a little wrench icon. And if you click that wrench icon, you'll often find more options. So I can now go to brush shape, and I can go to brush tip, and you can actually load up different, I can go to my materials folder and load up different brushes that are in my materials folder, which is sort of like a bank of assets that you can use in various ways in your comic making. And now I can set, a direction of rotation, a thickness, and this will change the quality of the panel border. See how it looks a little bit different now because it's using a different kind of brush. So you have a lot of options with this.
Can I react for a second? Oh my God. Yeah. What the heck? I mean, this is such a tool meant to help people with making comics be productive, and it's so flexible and be productive and to the level of depth and expertise you care to dive. And
yeah,
that's amazing. Like, so you can do all this stuff in like general purpose tools. Of course you can make comics with just pen and paper, but like this is giving you that level of editability in the context of comics it's stunning. So like you could go back through in a future edit and say like, I do want to change that panel border. Or
literally you can. Yeah, it's trivial to do it. If I take my operation tool, so this is the little cube tool with an arrow pointing at it, use this tool a lot in Clip Studio Paint, and I can select just that panel border, and now I can go in and change the brush tip. I can change the amount of spraying effect, the stroke, the texture. So let's just say I just want to simply just make the border thicker. I just like tap this a number of times, and now this border is thicker. Right. And then because it's a vector border, I can even, change with this tool, I can change its shape altogether. And the art inside doesn't get affected. As a matter of fact, if I click out of it now, going to another layer, my color layers are not held within that panel border. So,
okay.
So it didn't hide that. But you see what I'm saying, right? Like you can keep on tweaking it forever and ever. Which is, blessing and curse, depends on your disposition as an artist. Like I just find that I have to walk away from pages, and I set myself time limits on my stuff. But so the next thing I'll do is in my live area, I'll just go ahead and drag one big panel border for the whole page. And I don't know if you saw, but it snapped to the margins that I created. And now inside this panel folder, I'm going to create a series of subfolders to create my menus, or not to create my template, I should say. So while in this layer folder, I'm going to create 3 more folders. And there's going to be, there we go. And I'm going to name the topmost one inks. I'm going to name the second one pencils. And the bottom one is going to be colors. And inside of the inks folder, I'm going to create 2 raster. Oh no, I'm going to create a vector layer and a raster layer. And we'll talk more about those shortly. The vector layer and the raster layer on the bottom left side of the layer folder. The vector layer is indicated by a page icon with a little 3D cube next to it. Raster layer is indicated by a little page with the corner folded up. So I will call the vector layer inks, and then I call the next, the raster version. I call this soft inks. That's just a particular naming convention that I came up with for myself. What it means is just raster inks. You could also call it raster inks. I'll just do that for the purposes of this demo. Raster inks. Then in the pencils layer, I'll create a layer called roughs, and I'll create another layer called finished pencils, which is indicating I'm going to pencil the page at least twice. Then the colors layer, I will create a layer for now called flats. And then I would save this file as a template file. This is how the template is set up. So now I'm ready to start working, but I have, when I open up my Amazon Academy folder, my inks, you'll see there's all the pages numbered, and then at the bottom is page template, right? Mm-hmm. So I never have to set this up again. This is always set up for me forever and ever, right? So now with my page set up, let's see. I don't want to get ahead of myself. How are we doing on time?
Let's see. I think we're doing pretty well on time. There's
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, you got through your template.
Well, let's import some thumbnails, and then we can start playing with cutting the panel borders and look at some options for that. So so let's pretend I just opened this for the first time. I'm getting ready to start working on a new page. So now I'm going to go to the menu File, Import, Image. I click that, and then I navigate to where all my thumbnails are held. Let's just grab a page of thumbnails and drop it in. Now, oops, why is this not blue? Well, here's another neat feature of Clip Studio Paint. I'm going to go to my pencils folder. I'm going to change its layer mode to normal. I don't know why it sets it to through as the default, but it's switches to normal. And up in the layer property menu on the upper right, there's this little icon I can toggle to change the layer color to blue, and all layers inside of this folder will now be non-photo blue, which I would have done on the template mode in the first place, but I'm glad this happened this way because it shows you the difference. So now with the operator tool, after I've imported my image, I can now adjust the image size so that it conforms to roughly the size of the live area. And actually, let's drag the pencil layer outside of the panel folder so we can see where the bleed area is going to be. Okay. And so I'll drag this layer to the bottom of my pencils folder, and I will name it thumbnails. So now I've got my thumbnails imported. I've got the beginning of my pencils. So now I'm going to go back up to the panel border folder, and I'm going to go back down to the panel tools in the bottom left of the toolbar. And you can see there's rectangle frame, polyline frame, circle frame, frame border, pen. Then there's these other ones, this divide frame folder and divide frame border. And this one's a custom one that I made for myself. So these will be the two that you normally have, divide frame folder and divide frame border. Now these both do the same thing, but they operate in slightly different ways. What this is going to do is I'm going to choose divide frame border first. If I click and drag across the screen, you can see that it automatically makes a cut in the panel mask, creates a gutter there for you. And you can, I'll click and drag diagonally. So you can, I don't know how well you can see, but it's creating 2 ghost lines showing you like the cut it's going to make. And then when you just let go, it makes the cut. The difference is if you choose divide frame folder, it does the same thing, but watch my layer palette when I let go. It creates a second collection of layers in a folder to correspond with the new mask. And you can see it automatically duplicates the inks layers, the colors layers that are held within.
Oh, wow.
Which is nice, but that means that you're going to have a lot more layers to navigate. So for Amazon Academy, what I've been doing is just choosing divide frame fold or border, which leaves you with one folder, but it cuts the mask alone. And then at the bottom of this page, we see we've got a situation where we've got 4 even panels. And I could like try to eyeball it as best I can. But there's a much easier way to do it. If I go to my operator tool and click just on that bottom panel, this bottom area where the 4 panels are going to be, and go to layer from the menu, layer ruler frame, divide frame border equally. And click that. And it gives me the option to divide the frame or panel vertically and horizontally by a number of steps. I can go right as many as 6, 8, 10 even steps, or I just divide it 2 by 2, hit OK, and boom, it automatically cuts these into 4 equal squares. So
that's awesome.
So I'm almost there. So now we got this problem where the panel 1 is supposed to be a full bleed.
Thing to add. Yeah. So Shadow Wingtronics in the chat mentions as far as importing the pencils. So you can also set the pencils as draft, the little blue pencil in the in the layers. Yeah. And then it won't show up in the final image file.
Yeah, and then I don't have to like turn that layer off when I'm done. Yeah. That's another neat thing that's in the layer menu right there. So but I've just made it part of my workflow is just when I'm done and I've done my colors, just turn that layer, toggle those off with the eyeball tool. But yes, the draft layer thing is another neat function. There's a lot of cool functionality buried in the layer menu as well, which we'll talk a little bit about. Okay. But to finish off setting up my panel borders, again, with the operator tool, you'll notice that panel 1, I originally designed to be a full bleed off the page panel. Well, there's these little green anchors on each side. I can just grab them and drag them to change the panel size. And now I've got a full bleed panel in panel 1. Now, there's another thing to check. Always keep your eye on the tool property menu and the bottom of the second menu from the left. It's easier to just point on the screen. You can say, where is this option? Keep gutters aligned. This used to be called something else. I think it used to be called work with other panel borders. But if I toggle this to horizontal and adjacent, now if I change like the bottom of panel 2, I move the panel border. I think I did it wrong. Oh, okay. I had to set it to that. It's set to. So if I have it set to none, keep gutters aligned none, I can change this panel border as much as I want, and it won't affect anything else on the page. But supposing I realize that, these 4 panels on the bottom, I want them to be taller, and I want to cut into the space of panel 2, I toggle this, keep gutters aligned, horizontal and adjacent, tap that, and now when I move this panel border up, it automatically stretches the ones underneath.
My gosh.
Right? So, and I can move this one. Why did it not do that time? All. I need to hit all. There we go. What the ding dong applesauce? Okay, that works. But yes, you can set it so that it changes all of the panel borders at once. Or you can say just treat each one as its own entity, and that's by selecting keep gutters aligned none. So
that's impressive. So I mean, then the panels are resizing consistently relative to each other with that setting. And I mean, I'm still like, holy moly, all these are very useful settings. And once you know they're there, you're golden, right? I mean, overall, because you need to recall there's a lot of tools and a lot of nuances among these many tools. This is very handy, and I'm just hoping that like next time I'm laying out a comic page, I remember that all these features exist.
Yeah. This is something that I kept running into the problem of, like, for instance, when I divided those bottom 4 panels, I could not remember how to get there. And the only way I found out about it was because a student asked me about it. And like, can you do this? I'm like, there's got to be a way to do it. And so I like dug into tutorials. And like, not everything is like named or placed in the most intuitive place in the world, at least to my mind, is that in order to divide panel borders equally, I have to go to layer, ruler, frame, and then, divide frame border equally, right? Now, you can actually, this little Q icon, the upper left of the toolbar, you can set, this is like sort of like a launcher tool for creating quick commands, automated tasks and commands. So like I've got things where it's like, okay, well, I could turn on quick mask, turn off quick mask, undo, change canvas size. Like things that I use a lot, you can like set into this menu with create set, manage set, quick access set. This is called quick access. That's what it's called. This was something that they've rolled out in recent versions of Clip Studio Paint. And I wind up using this quite a bit now. So if it's something that is like, I don't know if I'm going to remember how to get there, you can set that as a quick access command. And you can even set it in the command bar on the top of the screen too, if this is something that you're really concerned about like finding ever again. But this muscle memory will come from just like, repeated use, right? So finally, and we talked about this in the episode about sound design, but the next step that I would do is I would start doing the lettering. Before I do any penciling, I figure out what all my balloon placement is going to be, and that's in the text tool, second from the bottom in most instances of Clip Studio Paint. But in there, you have like your text tool, your ellipses, balloon pen to draw custom balloons, balloon tail, and thought balloon tool. And so I won't go into this in too much detail because we did talk about this like about 5 or 6 episodes ago when we did the sound design episode. But I would go in and making sure that nothing goes outside of this live area, I would place my dialogue here. I'm saying stuff. And then after the text is typed, grab the curve balloon. I click drag 4 points to roughly make a balloon. Use the operator tool to fine tune the balloon. And finally, go back to the balloon tail tool, choose the spline balloon tail, which means I tap once, tap to follow the curve to point to the character's mouth. And then I can adjust the size of the tail after the fact and rotate it. So I would do all this first. Reason being, and I would put the lettering in a folder called lettering. And the reason I do this is because I want to make sure that I figured out my balloon placement before I figured out the final composition of the page. Like supposing that this character here needs to move over this far in order to accommodate some word balloons that are happening over here. Well, before I even pencil her, I figured out what space I need for word balloons so then I can make the penciling adjustments in relation to the word balloon placement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, you have these different constraints of like, what do you want to convey? And I mean, if you don't plan ahead, you end up with well, honestly, like I end up with a lot of comics with some crammed word balloon placement, and that just don't work in harmony with the greater composition.
Right. Yeah. And I that really bums me out when that happens with my comics. So it's painful enough that I've adjusted the way I do it so that the word balloons happen very early on, and then the penciling, aka coloring, happens, and maybe the word balloons will move after the fact. Like it's one of the neat things about the software is it's trivial to move things around once you've designed them and built them, right? With the operator tool, it's simple to move them around, but I try to get a sense of like, well, what is the actual real estate I need on the page for all of the sound elements?
I just want to comment, like, so I've reacted to a lot of your advanced use of the tools that I do think we're not getting paid by this company at all, but I would say that when you're working on a comic, the basic tasks and the basic tools that create affordances for you to be productive are fantastic. Like, so like just the ability to move a word balloon around, to reshape it and adjust it. That's not that advanced. I mean, it's just, what's that tool called? What'd you call it?
The operator tool.
Operator tool plus using the other basic tools. There's huge amounts of like boost in your productivity just with that alone, and adjusting and recovering from, well, like, oh, there's a little bit of a cramped layout, or these two word balloons need to actually connect now, or whatever.
Yep.
It's you don't have to know and mind the depths of all the nooks and crannies of the app to be able to do the basics.
Correct. Yeah, very, very correct. I mean, with a little bit of digging after you've, gotten the muscle memory of the initial tools, there's a lot of cool things you can do. Like, for instance, just like with the panel borders, there are vector tools that I can say like, oh, Dan said that he wants this to be like a bumpy balloon instead. I don't have to redraw it. I just literally just drew that over top of the balloon with the redraw vector line tool. And I can make it like a drippy balloon. Redraw vector line width. I can go, okay, well, I want this side to be smoother or this side to be thicker and this side to be thinner. Just drawing over top of it. And that's in the very bottom-most tool in the toolbar. There's a bunch of vector tools. There's the pinch vector line, so I can just like adjust the balloon just by tugging on it here and there. Right. Yeah, wow. And the same thing can be done with the panel borders. I can go to redraw vector line, go to the panel border, and let's say I want to just drag over top, and I've created like a jagged moment in the story, right? But yes, yeah, you don't need to know how to do all this stuff right away. We're just like saying like these are like the basic affordances, like the balloon tool, chopping panel borders, importing your thumbnails. So now that we're this far, do you want to take a break, Rob, and maybe talk a little bit about some people who make the show possible, and then we'll come back and we'll do some drawing in Clip Studio Paint?
I think this is the perfect time to take a break.
Okay. So is my video back? Hey, there I am.
And there's Jerzy.
Okay. So in about 1 minute and 30 seconds, we are going to actually do some drawing and see what that's like and how I do my penciling and inking and what the difference between vector and raster layers are. But before we do that, we have to thank some people who make this show possible. Those people, oh, where's my music? Where is my music file? There it is. Gotta thank the people who support us on Patreon. Yes. Whoop, that's the intro music.
Let's get fired up again. Sorry.
There we go. Okay, patreon.com/leaditowart is the website. What is it? It's a way for you to give us a monthly upvote. If you believe in Rob and believe in me and believe in what we do, you can support us for as little as $1 a month. I want to thank some people who have been doing exactly that. First up, Stephen Stonebush. Thank you, Stephen, for supporting us on Patreon. You can find Stephen's work at Stonebush Art on Instagram. Also, Cameron Callahan. Thank you, Cameron, for believing in us and what we do. You can find Cameron on Twitter at Cam Callahan. Also, Tim F. Thank you, Tim, for your support. Really, really appreciate it. Also, Gail Bushman. You can find Gail Bushman on Instagram at Nightingale Art. Thank you, Gail. And also Courtney Hahn. Thank you, Courtney, for believing in us and what we do. You can find Courtney on Twitter at Cortoony. And we will link to all these in the show notes. You can join them all at patreon.com/leanintowart, where you will find all the shows we make, as well as the extra leans, the shows we make just for people who support us on Patreon. We do one every month, and those posts become an open mic thread where you can talk about whatever you want. And also those episodes are kind of like Rob, and it's like the Rob and Jerzy Dojo, where we take sort of ideas out of the air and try to turn them into a topic. And we almost do every month, don't we, Rob?
Yeah, pretty much. And either way, it's fun to try I guess the other version of this, where we just want to, as we admit, like we end up digging into topics even in extra lean, but you just don't know what's going to happen. It's a lot of unplanned goodness, and it's a lot of fun.
And patreon.com/leanintowart. Thank you to everybody who supports us there. It means a lot. Okay. Here comes the second half of the show. There we are. Classic bridge music from the old days. So, time for me to fire up the screen share again. And let me see. Screen share, full screen share, and present to everyone. Now we are in it. Okay. All right. So what are we doing next? Drawing. Isn't that what we had on the docket?
Yeah, drawing. And,
okay.
Not sure where you wanted to start, but I think this is perfect. You've laid out the panel. You've laid out a page. You've got some panels, and all the magical goodness of how Clip Studio Paint sets that up as separate layers, and they're pre-masked, and it's awesome. But now what about
Well, let's talk about brushes just for a second, because we were talking about how like everything is very customizable in this, and you're not limited to what you get out of the box. And one of the things that is pretty nice about Clip Studio Paint is how easy it is to make custom brushes. So let's go up to, I'm just going to go to, this is the collection of pens that comes with the software. This is your G pen, mapping pen, turnip pen, calligraphy, for effect line, and so on. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to right click on, or I guess it'd be a control click on the Mac or option click. I'm not sure, but it'd be like an extra key click. And you get this menu that pops up, and you would get the option that we want is duplicate subtool. Subtool is just their term for the tool that you're using. The tool is brush. The subtool is G pen in this case. I'm going to duplicate my G pen, and I'm just going to let's call it custom pen 1. It gives you the option to give it your own special name. And then I'm going to go up to, or rather down here in the menu below, the tool property menu, there's that little wrench icon. And I click that wrench icon, and now I can start playing with what this pen is going to do. We can change the size. We can change the opacity of the ink. We can change the blending mode of the ink. In other words, we can make it multiply, color burn, linear burn, black burn, subtract, lighten, screen, just like you do with layer modes. You can change the way it interacts with other colors. So like, people talk about the painting engine in Clip Studio Paint is really remarkable. And it is like, we can say that like, hey, I want this thing to act more like oil paints so that when I scrub on another color with it, it will mix with that color, right? And then we can change the brush tip. So once again, I'm going to click on brush tip, and I'm going to go to the material folder and say that I want to use a special material for this brush. And I'm going to hit the little add brush tip shape icon, which is a little page icon there. And it opens up my materials folder. And we have all these options in here, right? And these are ones that just come with Clip Studio Paint, but you can make your own very simply. Let's say I'm going to grab this particular brush shape here and drop it in. And you can add multiple ones. I'm going to add that one too. And it's giving you a preview at the top. Can you see it, Rob? The little preview at the top?
Wow.
So, and I can change the thickness of the brush, which is going to change the way the brush looks. I can change the direction in which the custom brush tips are applied.
And that's per each custom material, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have the first material selected. You're making adjustments to that one, and you could then make separate adjustments to the second material you added. And you added a third.
And you can add as many as you want, as far as I know. So now I'm changing the thickness of that particular piece of. I think I'm doing that. Let me see. Okay, now it's just changing the thickness of the brush. So, and then spraying effect. I can turn on a spraying effect to create like a particle randomness to the brush. Or I can change the stroke. That you can add a texture.
What?
So you can add custom textures to the brushes. And so like you can play around with this. I'm just going to close this out for now, and I'm just going to open up some of Ray Frendon's brushes, because this is how he makes these. Like my favorite brushes, like it's actually his dry brush inker Alt 2, which gives you like this really nice dry brush inker effect, but I made a slightly denser version that I call wet brush inker. And it's got, when you open it up and you hit that little wrench icon, you can see the custom materials that he used. You can see the texture he used. So like there's like a watercolor paper texture on this brush. So you can add and you can create like some really, truly astonishingly like natural media looking brushes. And probably the ones that I'm most impressed with lately, and I posted this on Instagram, is his watercolor brushes. I bought those a while back. I'm going to go ahead and pull up a page of this comic that I'm working on for Seriously right now. And I'm doing all the tones with his watercolor brushes. And when you look at them, they look like they're drawn on natural media, right? Like you see the texture in the sky there. And I'll go to the watercolor.
So like a volumetric feeling in the value differences, and it looks cloudish and wet.
And see how like when you're painting with it, what it looks like.
Wow.
So you can get some pretty, with a little bit of playing, you can get some really cool looking brushes. Let's look at his brush tip. So he's got, you can see the materials used for the brush tip. You can see he doesn't have a spraying effect on this, but you can look at his what texture he used to create that effect. And so you can sort of reverse engineer your own brushes too, or you can just duplicate a brush that you got from somebody else and make adjustments for yourself. So, but yeah, his watercolor brushes are pretty great. But so that's all to say that this is why I have such a massive collection of brushes, that they're both purchased and made custom for myself. So anyway, so going to the pencils folder in my roughs layer, what I'll do now is I'll go to my thumbnails and I'll turn the opacity down to approximately 30%. And then I will go to the layer above on my roughs layer. And then for my rough penciling, I'll often just use my wet brush inker alt brush because I really love the way it feels. And this is where I would say, like, be prepared to spend a couple weeks playing around with different brushes until you find the one that feels right for you. It's worth that investment. And I played around with a lot of different brushes before I got to this one. And now on my roughs layer, this is where I work out my anatomy. I'm going to build off of my thumbnails and correct the pose and just very roughly lay in and figure out what the anatomy of the character is going to be. So you're not very rough, drawing through like you're supposed to.
Yeah, I mean, so now you're doing an underdrawing structure for this, for this one character in that panel.
And I'll go through and I'll try to do like a little bit of the rough detail over top of them too, right? I'm not just doing the stick and bubble figure, the wireframe. I'm doing actually like a very loose, and I'm trying not to spend a ton of time on it. But I'm trying to get like a slightly more cleaned up version of what I had.
Which is an understatement. This, yeah, it's a big leap from your underdrawing. And what's interesting is you're including details of this character, like their accessories and a little hint at their hairstyle and outfit.
Yeah, I'm working out the clothes. And I mean, again, this is another of those advantages to digital pencils, is that like once I get like, oh, her feet are actually below the border, I can either change the panel border or just quickly select her with the lasso tool and move her. And, we've all seen this in digital drawings. Like, let's say I want that hand to be a little lower, just select that arm. And when you do selections, you get this little menu underneath, which gives you the option to deselect, invert the selected area, expand selected area, or even right here, scale up, scale down, and rotate. I'm going to click that. I'm going to move the center arrow of my rotate tool to her shoulder, and then just click and drag to move it around. Great. Deselect, and can keep working. So I'll do the whole page this loose, right? And I can even pull up to show you in my finished page. I'll hide the inks, I'll hide the colors, and I'll turn the pencils on and turn the opacity up all the way. And let's see, let's go back to my roughs. Yeah, this is what the roughs look like. That's what the final result is. But you can see, like, it's still pretty sketchy. You can see where I've drawn through things.
It looks great. You ever consider doing a comic that was at this stage?
What do you mean? Like, this is final?
Yeah. Yeah, so then you watercolor right here.
Oh, I don't know. Well, as a matter of fact, the Seriously comic I'm doing, I have been, out of necessity, leaving the pencils at that stage, right? So, like, there's the pencils look like. They're comparatively rough to how I traditionally pencil my comics.
Yeah, I mean, it's a step, but then it's an interesting step in that how clearly everything is conveyed, and it's, yeah, there's a little bit of the underdrawing that remains here too, but there's so much of the specific form in that represented there too. So,
but yeah, there's the finished pencils. So on this, once I've got this part done, I would turn this layer's opacity down to about 30%, hide the thumbnails, and then on the pencil finishes, I'll go in, whoops, and do the final detailed drawing where I'm really tightening things up. All the underdrawing stuff goes away, and so on. So the level of roughness of your pencils is, I think that's a very individual choice. I know Zach Giolongo works extremely loose. I've inked his pencils, and I remember having to, like, for my own comfort, having to like clean up some of the pencils to make it make sense to me because I couldn't decipher some of his lines. But for myself, I tend to, if I'm working for myself, this is the tightness that I like. And to which Zach argued with me, he's like, well, then why even ink it if it's going to be that tight?
I would echo Zach at this point. So your loose pencils have so much clarity that I was being a little impish when I said, "Hey, have you considered, making?" And it was as if I was quacking at you, but like, you're like, "What are you saying?" But like this, but your tight pencils, come on, dude.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I think of it as, so I don't know, whatever, lobbing a total random food for thought, unrequested comment, because the tight pencils, I mean, that's, I don't know, throw some toning in there and you've got
probably.
Seriously, look at the detail on the pencils, the column and the sort of the ornate, the design work in the roof of the building and all that. My word. Very interesting.
Yeah, well,
there's a lot of animation that makes do with less than that.
That's true. Oh, also, yeah. So, like in the case of this building behind them, I did it on a separate layer because I just drew the window once and I drew the column once and I just like duplicated them because it was a flat face facing us readers. So in this case, all I had to do was, like if I hide this, you can see there's all the pieces that I just like copied and then erased where they overlapped with the characters. So, okay. I want to make sure that I respect everybody's time, and let's talk about inking. I think that's next on here, right? Oh, there's also, basic tools. How do you do like this perspective work, like in the background there? Let me turn back on my thumbnails. So in that case, you have, again, at the very bottom of your page, and this is actually nested in the same area as your panel borders, is you have ruler tools. And there's, once I open this up, you can see there's a whole mess of different rulers in here. And the one that I use for this particular case is the perspective ruler. What I would do is, on my roughs layer, I would take the perspective ruler and you click and drag to create your first vanishing point line, and click and drag to create your second. And then it's not going to let you draw anything that's not, let me turn the opacity back up in this layer, that doesn't conform to that vanishing point, that 1 point perspective that I just created. And you can create multiple points of perspective. So let's go back to before I created the ruler. And let's create, here's my first vanishing point, and here's my second vanishing point. And after you create your ruler, you can actually change the horizon line. You can move it around with the operator tool. I can click and right click on it and choose horizontal eye level so that like the horizon line is perfectly horizontal, but it doesn't have to be. And so now it will only let me draw lines that correspond perfectly to this 2 point perspective. It won't let me draw anything outside of what works in that perspective on a grid. So in that case, what I would do is I would go ahead and I would draw, start roughing in my, and up here in the top of the command bar is the options to turn the ruler snap on and off. So I'll turn it off to go do some freehand work, like what is this called? Is this an ionic?
Oh.
It's not a Doric pillar. I think it's an ionic. Isn't that right? So I would.
Yeah, I don't recall. I remember those words. I remember they describe pillars. But
yeah. I forget what this one is exactly what this is called, but I would rough in that part, freehand. And then when it comes to doing like the top of, I would turn the ruler back on by tapping that little snap to special ruler icon in the command bar at the top of the screen. And then I can draw the other, architectural parts of the building. And again, this is on my rough layer, so I'm not really worrying too much about getting the perspective perfectly right, but I'm just roughing in what I think it should look like, and so on. Do the stairs. Oh, come on, I'm really close to the horizon line now. Yeah, and I'll rough that in, and then I will go to the finished pencils layer, turn the opacity down on that, and let's make the rulers anew to do the final version, and so on.
I haven't checked it out, but Shadow Wingtronics mentions in the chat that Doug Hill did a good tutorial on rulers in Clip Studio Paint recently, and that's
great.
Yeah,
Doug Hill's tutorials we talked about last time are really, really useful. So, I mean, if you're interested in that, I mean, I would say we will link to his in the show notes, so you can follow up on that. But that's another tool I use at the penciling stage a lot. So, like
Anthony in the chat clarifies the pillar tops as ionic.
Okay. Yeah.
And then one other thing to bring up in the chat, I think is interesting. That is, I think it's an underpinning related, but it's I'm just flagging this verbally in just to bring it to your attention, because you are super focused on on the art and the demo, which is awesome. And thank you for doing all this demo, Jerzy. You're helping a lot of people with this. And so Jonathan Rector mentioned in that he basically, I'm trying to paraphrase, but maybe I'll do a bad job. He goes, have you guys ever been torn on a style to pursue, or have you moved past that for productivity? And yeah, because we're seeing you execute a particular style that I'm sure you figured out as part of an earlier development phase for this project, right?
Sure. With Amazon Academy, well, no, I mean, I choose different styles depending on what the project requires. So I would say very much so I'm thinking about this. Like, so for instance, when you look at the finished art of Amazon Academy, it's more like my more polished ink work from, like my early days working on things like the Front Rebirth, the Ninja High School stuff I did, sort of manga influenced, but also influenced by people like I want to say Ty Templeton, Kurt Swan, Rick Leonardi. So it's slightly cartoony, but slightly more realistic. It's definitely not like what I do with Boulder and Fleet, right? It's kind of a slick, open line. I don't use a whole lot of blacks in my work, except when I'm drawing like gothy girls. But like I render my shadows with color or tone, right? Whereas with the Captain Seriously books, the ones I've been working on recently, I don't know how well this is registering, but I'm using a much more jagged inking style because, and I've talked about this in the live streams when I'm inking this stuff, is that I'm specifically going for a post-apocalypse kind of vibe. And that was why I chose like these gray tones, this watercolor tone. So I wanted everything to look very brittle and dusty. Like everything's caked in like years and years of decay and dust, like what Mad Max's world looks like, right? Everything should look desiccated. And so I specifically chose like this very jaggedy inking style, which I'll compare it one more time. Like if you look at like, say, like the lines in this girl's hair, right? Versus
more rounding and fluidity. And there's almost like a lot of your lines in particular, like you go for like a really long flowing stroke.
Yeah.
Typically.
I like to try to define a shape with a single contour if I can. Like that's like a fun thing for me to play with. Like, can I do like the whole side of this woman's body with one stroke, right? Like render the look of it with one ink line. Whereas with this, I have an internal rule that I don't use curved lines. Like all the curves are made up of straight lines. Like if you look at that little puff of cold breath coming out of this kid's mouth, right? There's no curves in there, right?
Yeah. So yeah, they're very different impression, different style.
Yeah, look at his ear. Like that curve of his ear is made up of a bunch of straight lines that add up to the ear.
Wow.
So And it was part of this calculated move to try to like create something that feels very brittle and dusty. And also it was formed out of the deadline. It was like, if I'm not worried about trying to capture this perfect, like, you know, sometimes I'll break out a ruler tool just to do like the contour of a character's face because I want to get it exactly right. You know, you can create custom rulers like that. Whereas with this, it's like I have to get these pages done in under 5 hours each. So there's got to be a calculated cost here of like, I've got to find a way to speed up the production while still have it look good and still have the look match what I need, right? Like what the story requires and what my resources are as an artist in terms of time, in terms of materials. So, but that said, I mean, like it's always a tight battle because I wind up designing these pages that are like, despite the fact that they are quick to ink, you know, they can have a lot of complexity to them that I didn't, you know, it's like,
Yeah,
well, I
there's
could have.
a ton of value and atmospheric perspective in that for
Yeah,
something
here's
that's just sort of, you know, theoretically like a simpler aesthetic, but that's wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, even, despite the fact that I'm looking for shortcuts, I'm always also finding more interesting layouts to play with that make it more complicated to draw. So it's I'm at war with myself constantly with this project. Like, keep it simple, keep it easy to do. Oh, but you know, it looks so much cooler if I did it this way. But anyway, so yeah, and then like with I recently did. Yeah, I did a test that I posted on Patreon where I opened up some Baron von Bear pages and I was trying out like the Ray Friendon watercolor brushes to see if I could make it look like traditional watercoloring digitally. And you can see that the ink style that I use on this is utterly different than the other ones. So I changed the tools depending on the project and what I think it requires. Amazon Academy is meant to be like a Greek mythology school. And so I wanted it to look kind of like clean and classy and crisp. So
yeah, so I wonder, like, so that is sort of a and Jonathan hinted at this in his when he commented, this could be like its own probably topic or own episode as well, like really digging into style. And I'm because yeah, I'm intrigued about like other aspects that led you to those decisions and whatnot too. But then there's a couple more things to cover in Clip Studio Paint. So I'm wondering, you know, knowing that, do we want to like maybe use those as sort of final thought wrap up?
Final thought. Oh, that sounds like a good idea. Okay, well, let me go ahead and stop the screen sharing again. And how about we say in a couple minutes, we close with final thought about like talking about like the way layers behave in a funny way in Clip Studio Paint. And once you wrap your head around it, it's like, oh, wow, Clip Studio Paint is so much more powerful in the way it handles layers than say Photoshop or Illustrator. But before we do that, we got to thank some more people who make this show possible. And those people happen to be us. We make the show possible. We make lots of things, and then we bring all that the experiences and the questions that come through making things into topics for the Lean Into Art cast. And the thing that I make that I hope that you will check out today is a book called Boulder and Fleet Mining for Trouble, which I have a custom URL now. So you can go to boulderandfleet.com/books, and that will get you to this book.
Nice.
Easy to remember. boulderandfleet.com/books. And Mining for Trouble is a comic that I made entirely in Clip Studio Paint. Like outside of the thumbnails, it was 100% digital. And there's the cover that I did, painted entirely digitally in Clip Studio Paint, documented it on my Patreon. What is it about? It's about a bear and a bird who are best friends. And, you know, Fleet, the bird, wants to become the most famous adventurer of all time. But she has partnered with this bear who would rather make friends out of his enemies than conquer his enemies. And so Fleet's calculation is if we defeat enough enemies and win enough treasure, we will be the most famous people or adventurers of all time. But she's constantly having to push her gentle bear friend into these battles, and they learn from each other. That he learns things that there's a time and place for force, and she learns that there's more to being a hero than beating up bad guys. And this particular story, they are just picnicking on a ridge, and this mine down in the gorge beneath gets attacked by these mineral people, and they wind up getting roped into the battle with these mineral gals, Sapphire, Rube, Agnes and Roxanne, who all have their own special ability as mineral people. You can purchase it as a trade paperback or as a digital download at boulderfleet.com/books. Rob, you made a workshop.
Yeah, I've got this workshop available called, well, so I mentioned, well, I'm a UX designer, I'm a UX facilitator and all this stuff. And there are some techniques, I mean, and I, even back like in November, if you remember Art Sound Off, I made a point where I wanted to share and advocate for how like user experience, or these techniques are really their ideas and things that anyone can use to make their projects more, make things better for the people you're trying to serve. And even try to find a way to level up for who you're working with, and you're all doing this together, trying to keep your user in mind, right? So with that in mind, I made this workshop that is at skillshare.com, and it's called Drawing User Journey Maps to Design User Experiences, Gather Ideas, and Collaborate. Where okay, user journey map, I mean, you're familiar probably with storyboarding. You have a sequence of things. Well, if you use that to like put yourself in the feet, in the shoes of your user who's coming to your thing. Where were they before they found your project or your product or your service? What's it like when they first meet it? What's it like then, and after that, and after that, and after that? And now you have this idea of a user experience journey. Now, what if you use that to like dive in from the different perspectives of the people you're collaborating with? Or if you're working solo, what if you just sort of make sure you're thinking it through thoroughly by wearing different hats, by putting on a business hat, by putting on like a builder or engineering hat, like where you think about like your constraints for feasibility and stuff. You combine all that, all of a sudden you have this picture of like, well, wow, there may be a part of the journey that could use a lot of work, or that you have a lot of questions, but in some way, you've now got this spotlight for what makes sense to work on next. That's what this class is all about. It's only 47 minutes. And it's like 9 different little small modules. It's, you go at it bite-sized, a few minutes at a time. And to bring you through creating a project, to get some hands-on experience where you'll learn the mechanics of the user journey map, but also a bit of the sort of mindset and philosophy for being that user-centered and collaborative. So if you're curious about that, you want to check it out, the easiest way I can think of to do that is go to robstenzinger.com. There's a link right there in a sort of a tile on the front page that says Drawing User Journey Maps to Design. Click on that, and it'll take you to a landing page on Skillshare where you can just, well, take the class if you're already signed up. You may as well, because you're paying for Skillshare, right? And it's kind of like Netflix that way. Just check it out. But if you're not signed up for Skillshare yet, that's a way to get, you can sign up and then get 2 free months. So easy peasy.
Which is more than enough time to download and avail yourself of the class. And I if I could underline something, it's like one could argue that like, well, but I'm like just an independent cartoonist. I don't really have to think about teams. You have to think about who's going to engage with your stuff, how they're going to engage with your stuff, because you have readers. You're going to bring in printers into the world. If you're going to be printing and distributing the book, you're going to start thinking about like when you go to conventions or trade shows or conferences, who are you going to meet there and what are their needs, and how will their experience with the thing that you make matter? Like, how can you make it a meaningful experience? So I would argue that even if you think that you're a team of one, the moment you start engaging with the world, you're engaging with a lot of different people with a lot of different kind of needs, and putting yourself into their shoes and into their mindset and thinking about what their experience with your work is going to be, kind of matters if you want to take this thing seriously, right?
That's awesome. Thanks, Jerzy. Yeah, I agree. And because you have essentially, like, one way to call that out is there's stakeholders, there's involvement, there's other perspectives that affect what you make, even if it's mainly you're a team of one. That's great. You can dig in deeper. Thanks, Jerzy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as somebody who's currently pitching books, I'm thinking about this a lot as I write my pitches and think about how I can craft my pitches to appeal to the different publishing houses that I'm approaching, right? That is some of that sort of mindset and that perspective taking that I have to do. All right. So, but maybe you're not so interested in the books that we make or the games that we make. Fair enough. The show is a thing that we make, and we have more things like it at lianatort.com/workshops. We can download self-contained videos at a price of your choosing, even free. If you're watching this on YouTube, giving it a thumbs up helps more people find the show. And if you're listening to the show in an audio podcatcher, giving us a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to us helps more people find the show as well. And we thank everybody who's been doing exactly those things. It means a lot to us.
Mm-hmm. It really does. Thank you.
All right, let me turn on screen sharing one more time so that I may go into layering. And there we go. Okay, layers. How do layers work? You don't have to use all the different kinds of layers that you can make in Clip Studio Paint, but they do have some affordances that are really nice. So let me, real quick, go to this Amazon Academy page and hide some of the layers underneath and just go to my ink layers. Now, in this particular comic, I have what looks like at least 6 layers that I use, like a basic 6 layers that I use in my inking. Okay, and I've highlighted them here. We have background, background holds, background soft inks, characters, character holds, and character soft inks. In other words, my characters are all on one layer grouping, and the backgrounds are drawn on a different layer grouping. You can see that because I've removed the characters. I'll remove the lettering too, just so we can see the backgrounds here. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then this is kind of fussy. This is a little bit fussy, and it's partially to make it easy for me to do what are called background holds. Now, or rather line holds, color holds, I think is actually the proper term. Color holds is when you change the color of a line beyond black. So if I turn off my holds layer on my background, why is that not working? Oh, I know why, because those tree branches are drawn on the soft inks layer. Okay. So in Clip Studio Paint, you have 2 different kinds of drawing layers. You have vector and raster layers. And a vector layer means that it is a layer composed of, instead of pixels rendering pixels are rendering the ink color on here, but the layer information is not in pixels. It is in mathematics. It is in, there we go. Can you describe it for
lines and curves? Yeah. So you have points. You have points, and between each of these points is a line, and then that may also be influenced by like curve information too. So
right. Thank you.
Yeah. So think of it as a connect the dots, and that is what is defining the line. And so the brush following that line based on rules configured for the brush and your preferences create that final impression of like, oh, those are pixels on the page, but behind the scenes, it's this editable vector.
So when I'm inking, I actually ink just the contours of the shapes of the characters. You can see that I made the interior details go away on this gal's coat. And so the actual interior details are on a completely separate layer. Reason being,
wow.
Yeah, I have a specific reason I do it. And I taught this as a course with adults, and some of them got very visibly annoyed at how fussy this is. So like this is the comics drawing version of the AeroPress coffee. It just tastes better, like it's like that. It's like, yeah, I know it takes 15 minutes. There's a lot of paraphernalia, and we're all standing here waiting for the coffee to happen. And it tastes only 15% better, but it tastes better. Okay, so the reason being is that because the vector layer is just math, I could take the vector tools like the pinch vector line tool, and I can change the shape of the lines and the position of lines after I've drawn them, and it does not damage the quality of the line. It retains the brush's brush information. I can even go so far as to redraw the width after I've drawn the line. Let's say I got the line exactly right, but the value is off, right?
Yeah.
I can go ahead and redraw the width of the line. I could redraw the vector line, retain the brush information. So my drawing I can always fix it if I really want to. But the reason I put the interior details information on a raster layer is because when it gets time to flat, so now I'm going to create just like a regular raster layer. I'm going to call this one flats. And I'm going to go up to my inks folder where all the inks are contained. And I'm going to highlight the set reference layer icon, which is this little lighthouse. So now what I've done is I've said everything that's on the inks layer. When I work with my flats layer with my paint bucket tool, and of course we didn't go into a lot of detail on this, but is just like with all the other tools, there's a lot of paint bucket settings nested within the paint bucket tool. You can choose the one that says refer other layers, and I can tell it down here in the tool property menu, only interact with the layer you're on plus the reference layer. So now when I choose a color and I take the paint bucket tool, notice I'm on my flats layer, I can click inside of her coat and it will fill as if those lines are on the flats layer, right? It's like when you use all layers on in Metabank Paint or with the paint bucket tool in Photoshop. It's interacting with all layers. But because my interior lines are on a separate layer, I can toggle them off and just fill the contours very quickly and easily, and not have to worry about how it's going to interact with those interior lines. Because if I were to, say, try to fill, let's just choose like coat color. You see, now all of a sudden I have to like tap around her coat and like fill all those little. You see?
So I get it. I'm not into the AeroPress, but I might be into this AeroPress, you know?
So yeah.
This is
so like, so now I don't have to deal with these ghosted lines because I only have the interior or the outer contour, and I can flat a page in literally 10 minutes tops. Somebody might argue that, like, well, it's not that big a deal that you get those ghosted lines and you have to do a lot of tapping around. And it's not that big a deal, because also I can hide my inks layer real quick. There's a tool in the vector tools down here at the very bottom called correct line width. And I'm going to say thicken width by 3 points. And if I just drag over top, whoop, 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 fill in those spots really easily. Right? So if you get like those little ghost pixels in there, it's not the end of the world. It's easy to clean that up. Right?
It's tough. It depends on how hard it is, how unnatural it feels to do the contour inking separate from the internal detail. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it's a little, like I said, it's a little bit fussier. There's a little bit more setup, and it's kind of weird to draw the interior details on one layer and the outer contours on another layer. But it makes flatting so much easier. It speeds it up so much, at least for me. So, you know, but it makes you have to deal with increased file sizes. Now, not every project has that, because like this particular one, I ink all of the inks on a raster layer. All the inks are just, that kid overlaps stuff, so I put him on a separate layer. But like if I hide the inks, right, that's it. And I specifically chose watercolor for the tones, both to create that feeling of desolation and dustiness, but also because it would prevent me from being too precious about setup on this thing. So I can just like speed through the drawings and get them done to a serviceable level and get the shading done to a serviceable level. But I'm not, like you can see right here, like when you look really at what I've got there, it's kind of sloppy. But when it's combined with the line art, it looks finished, right?
Yeah. Well, I suppose you can create new observations and judgments if you separate a piece of art out at different stage of development, and then zoom in on particular details. Because this to get rid of the lines gets rid of, you know, a bunch of the project, right? I mean, it's the goal wasn't to make a painting, but like when you started, I mean, that's, you know, there you go. You have a value layer to base a painting if that was your plan.
Yeah. I guess, that's a good way of thinking about it. Whereas like with Amazon Academy, I'm going with more, I don't know what you'd call it.
Crisp?
Yeah, crisp coloring, you know, simple highlight shadow, but yeah. So, but that's the way I use
the level of detail in like a well-produced animation, like a gargoyle thing.
Yeah. So, and it's the same thing with my backgrounds. So the background layer, if we look at like this building here, I have a layer that I put the interior details on, and I have a layer that I put the outer contours on. You can see that there, right? So like there's if I hide the lettering, you can see the tree branches for the tree, and then on the separate layer with my pattern brush, I painted on the foliage.
It's very interesting that you do this. I'm just having a quiet debate in my head. 'Cause it'd be so disruptive. It's to draw in a different style, but I see some potential interesting benefit. Do you get more reuse out of your, like the art you produce to like fill in?
Well, yeah. So like this particular column that I drew in the background here actually gets used on like 3 or 4 different pages. So I am, and as a matter of fact, like I think some of these columns got used. I like flipped them and then I like transformed them a little bit. That's another nice thing about vector layers is that when you transform them, it doesn't damage the line quality. So I took this particular column right here, which I'll highlighted in pink, and I reproduced it on another page. And then when I shrunk it down, I didn't have to redraw any lines. I did to redraw some of the interior details a little bit, but the outer contour was intact. So that's another advantage to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I mean, yeah, that's in the pros and cons that I was quietly weighing in my head. It's like that's definitely a positive. So
whereas with this project, because I draw it so fast, if I'm going to reuse an asset, I'll just like drop in the pencils and just re-ink it. I'll drop in the pencils, transform it, let the distortion to the lines happen. Doesn't matter because I'm going to re-ink it anyway because I ink it so fast. So like there's trade-offs. There's pros and cons to both that way.
So this this process that you're using, you provided an awesome overview, and I do think like this is a nice nice episode to share around. That I think there's so many. Instead of going into one nitty gritty detail or whatever, this is like this is practical. Thanks for doing this, Jerzy. It's like what in your process are you like? What are you working on next for this? And like if someone were to reuse this, it's like what, I don't know. What do you think is a I don't know, something to keep in mind?
Something to keep in mind. Well, I mean, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do something where I ink it on paper and then import it and then try to watercolor it digitally, which is kind of like a backwards approach to how I would normally do it. Normally, I would like probably pencil and ink it digitally and try to watercolor over top of the final inks. But now I'm going to go the other way around just as a test for a pitch for Baron von Bear, which I showed that sample image from earlier. And I would say that like, I don't think you necessarily, so this would be my like top level, I don't want to call it advice, but the thing I would consider if I was embarking on this particular application is you don't need to fight all those battles that I showed you all at the same time. I would say pick the one that's interesting to you. And so in other words, like, well, I'm not ready to like draw or ink on a screen. Fair enough. Ink on paper, scan it in, and then play with those other tools in Clip Studio Paint. Or maybe you want to like something I did with that John Aman Amazing Man pinup that I showed a couple episodes ago is I penciled it in Clip Studio Paint, printed it out on Bristol, inked it with Crow quills, and then, scanned it back in and did final touch-ups digitally. So you don't necessarily like, I would say whichever tool stood out to you as being like, oh, that's the battle to fight. Do all the other stuff the way you used to do it, and then just play with that one particular tool. For me, the moment I was sold on Manga Studio / Clip Studio Paint was when I saw the ruler tools. Once I saw that you could do 3-point perspective in that, and that it like guides your pen for you and won't let you draw outside of that. And when I thought about all the hours I've like tensely had to hold big long rulers on a giant piece of Bristol board to get my 3-point perspective working properly, and all the French curves I had to employ to get all the curves just right. That was what won me over. So like if there's any one thing it did that won you over, just play with that tool to start with. So like you could say like maybe I draw all the characters on paper and I rough in all my backgrounds, and then I just draw the backgrounds in Clip Studio Paint, right? There's you don't have to go all in on any tool. All tools are there to assist you in whatever way that you need assistance.
It's pretty modular that way.
Yeah.
That's what's interesting. So you found, and then, so yeah, this was a good, like, you can cover almost every part of the process with what you've shared right now, but then you don't have to opt into all those. And I think that is good advice, because I get a little haunted and intimidated by the amount of depth where, so I have custom brushes, but it's disorganized and whatever. So I think, that's what I'm going to try to work on, is figure out ways to keep refining. And it's almost like that the whole what do you want to work on next? It's like you must have a list, and that's what and I'm guessing this. And even if I'm wrong, I think I want to try this. Is having a list of like what battles you're trying to fight next with the tool.
Yeah,
because you must have had that to arrive at this approach.
The battle I'm always trying to fight is how can I get this to look as natural media as possible, to make it look less digital. In the case of Amazon Academy, I only fought that battle to a point. Like, it's like, if I try to make this look even more natural media, it's going to cost me X amount of time. With the case of Baron von Bear, it's like, can I get the same speed, but have like a really natural media look to it, right? Like, so like the tensions I'm always facing is, when does my quest for natural media look cost me more time than I have? When does it encroach upon my resources, right? And so, and with Amazon Academy, the reason that battle was fought only to that point was because, unlike my other projects, it's a comic about a girls' school, which means I'm drawing crowds all the darn time. I'm always drawing classroom hallways and kids in classrooms. And so there's automatically a huge upfront cost in terms of time to actually draw the pages. It takes easily 3 times the amount of time it takes for that other project I was showing per page, right? So that means that cost is going to encroach upon other costs in terms of making it look more natural media. Okay, well, we're going to have to go with a simple coloring style because I'm spending so much time just drawing the kids. So
looking more natural media. Plus, I would guess, based on what you seem to have, a preference toward leaving a lot of things editable.
Yeah, I do. That is, and one may, I think, very rightly ask, well, how often do you go back? Actually, with the Boulder and Fleet Mining for Trouble book, I made a big error in the page setup, and I didn't have enough bleed space, so I had to go back and edit like 20 pages. And I was really grateful for having that extra editability, because I had to move a lot of stuff around in that book to finally get the print version done. So that was a case where, had I not done it that way, it would have cost me probably 3 times as much time as it did to get the book ready for print. So
good to know. All right. That was I think we went around a topic there.
I think we did too. Thank you, Rob, for helping navigate the conversation and bringing a lot of really good curiosity to the discussion to help guide and
see your process. Thanks for sharing it.
Okay, we record this show weekly. We still don't know exactly what day or time. We will land on that very soon. And but when we do, we stream it live on YouTube, and then we collect it as a podcast at leanintoart.com and patreon.com/leanintoart. We will be back next week with another episode. Until then, I have been Jerzy Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jerzy Drozd on Instagram.
Well, and I've been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com, and I'm Rob Stenzinger on Instagram.
Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
Okay, I'm going to shut off the stream. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out.